My name is Herb. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm just honored to be here. And it's really interesting. I had made a total plan to work really hard in 2021 to get a lot of things recorded and then to sort of cut back in 2022. And then I got exposed to Patrick and Susie, and they invited me to do something very innovative. From my standpoint, very innovative, and that is to do a summary of each of the steps appropriate to the month. January, step 1, February, step 2. And I thought, what a great opportunity to give a distilled version of my knowledge and my experience of each of the steps. And they gave me 2 occasions each month to do that, the second and the fourth Monday, so that I can actually split it in and have some real substance to a distilled version of the knowledge and experience with each of the steps out of the big book. I'm a big book fundamentalist and literalist in the best and healthiest of senses. And this meeting, if you were paying attention to the way they introduced it, is really in the spirit of the work and the ministry that I've adopted based on Bill's prophetic statement. In the first edition of the big book, I'm going to read from the foreword to the first edition, the very first paragraph of the first edition, the preface, first paragraph, last line, and besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all. Such a loaded prophetic statement. He wrote the book for alcoholics, but he had this underlying intuition. There's a solution here for the human race, for every individual. He had no idea, I'm sure, at that point, that Lois would adopt it for the Al-Anons in terms of a process addiction, and that so many people would adopt it for a substance addiction, drug, which had become pandemic today. Food, which is probably a bigger issue as a substance addiction than even drug addiction throughout the world, not just in the United States or North America or Western civilization. So I'm so happy to be here and talking about step 1. You had mentioned that, and I don't need a feedback right now, but maybe later on, that the audio is being recorded. I'd be disappointed if the video or the PowerPoints are not recorded also, but I hope they are, and I hope they're a piece of the work that's available to people. My name is Herb. My website is herbk.com. It has a lot of resources, all downloadable, all free. I don't do this as a business. I do this as a ministry. So I looked at step 1 2 weeks ago when I was first on, and we looked at that first half of the first step. Now I've changed it. I take liberty because of the expansion of the mission, both of this meeting and of my work. Of course, in the big book, that first half of the first step talks about alcohol, but we're here talking about the various kinds of addiction, substance or process addiction. I did that last week. Now I'm here to talk about the part after the dash. This is the best kept secret in the rooms. Now, I haven't been to all the meetings in the world. I haven't been to all the meetings even in my own area. But the meetings I've been to, the majority of the people in the rooms, and I've been sober since February of 1984. I went to a meeting every day for at least 10 years at the instruction of my sponsor. I am very acquainted with meetings all over the place and different kinds of meetings. The majority of the people in the majority of meetings do not understand the second half of the first step. It's a judgment that I try to hold in humility as well as in a positive stance. I didn't know the second half of the first step was not connected to the first half of the first step until I was 10 years sober. I got sober in February of 1984, but I began to awaken in February of 1988. I had a sponsor. I went to a meeting every day. I called my sponsor every day. I went to step studies and I went to book studies, and I'm a mad dog seeker. I take everything seriously. Heavy does it is my motto. Unfortunately, sometimes that gets me in trouble. I heard a man share in 1988 in a way that intrigued me, and he helped me go through the steps out of the big book, and I had my first spiritual awakening. I saw that I had an addiction problem, and I understood it for the very first time. Up till then, I thought that I was an alcoholic because of my drama. And I found out that I am an alcoholic because I have a body that's different. The doctor's opinion revealed to me that I have an allergy that is a craving, and that the only solution is abstinence. That's not on the screen. It should have been adjusted to be there and under the lower arrow. We looked at that, the doctor's opinion. I am biochemically condemned. When I take a drink, my chemistry changes, connecting to the alcohol chemical, and the interaction is lethal. And there's nothing I can do about it. I am powerless. It's a chemical, biological, physiological reaction. I'm hoping you're hearing that. The second time I went through the steps 3 years later, this man was very patient with me. He helped me unpack insane. Up till that point, I had heard and mouthed the words in the rooms, oh, I'm just insane. No, I'm ignorant and irresponsible. That's not what insane means in the big book. Look at page 37, Bill defines it. At the conclusion of the story on Jim, the car salesman who put a little whiskey in his milk, unhealthy perspective comes from the Latin sanus, which means health, in, which means not healthy thinking. I have a vulnerability to an obsession, which is a delusion. The thought is the obsession. The content of the thought is a lie, a delusion. It'll be different this time. That's the classic one for all of us. And we need to awaken, that says, at the bottom, which you can't see. I apologize for that. So that was last time I talked to you, to take a look at the addiction problem, powerless problem, no choice problem. These are not poetic terms. These are concrete terms to say, I do not have a choice. When I take a drink, the biochemistry will hijack me. When I don't take a drink, and I intend not to take a drink, my vulnerability of my mind defect, we call insanity, vulnerability, I will, without any thought at all, or some little thought, take a drink. The obsession will hijack me. So far, this is a problem. Notice at the top, I said a problem. It's not the problem. The real problem is that I have no choice, yes, over my addiction, but over my unmanageability. Well, what is that? It's not, I'm an addict and therefore my life is unmanageable. That's not the dash. If that were the case, it would be an and, not a dash. The dash means this is a new thought. It's connected because it's under the heading of powerless, meaning no choice. Notice I've changed the heading. No choice. I have free will, but not in managing my life. That's why I believe Bill could say in that preface to the first edition, our way of living may have its advantages for all, because he's talking to 100% of the people when he's talking about unmanageability. What does it mean? Bill didn't construct the big book with this in mind this way. This happened to be given to me in my 10th year of sobriety, my third journey through the steps. This man introduced me to the bedevilments. They're on page 52. This is in chapter 4. It clearly wasn't Bill's intention to unpack unmanageability as part of step 1. I'm going to unpack unmanageability as part of step 2 and as part of the preparation for step 3. Bill says on page 45 of the big book, lack of power is our dilemma. So we have to find a power other than ourselves. Well, that's what this book is all about. I'm paraphrasing from page 45. He makes this transition from the addiction problem and the body and the mind problem to the will problem, lack of power, lack of willpower. Utterly, he says on page 45. He uses that term where he again uses it in reference to the third step, but here he's using it with regard to the first step. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Again, Bill's he is a poet, he's a mystic. But he's very careful with his words. He's a wordsmith. Our human resources, body and mind, perhaps, because he's covered those already. The doctor's opinion, his own story, there is a solution. In fact, he ends his commentary on addiction, the alcohol problem, on page 43. He ends his commentary, his suggested approach to step 1, on page 43. The alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Nothing about unmanageability. But this man who took me through the work in the third iteration, 1994, it took 2 years. It was a very contemplative journey through the steps. Had me look at this. That's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable me to find a power greater than myself, which will solve my problem. What's my problem? No, not addiction. He said it above. Lack of power, lack of willpower. And this man, beautiful insight, looked on page 52 of that chapter. It's called the bedevilment chapter because that word is in there. And he connected it to unmanageability. This is the behavioral description. And he had the brilliant idea to make it personal and present tense. Because here I am 10 years sober. I've had 2 spiritual awakenings. I've gone through the steps very carefully with mechanics. And I both understand it. And I've had a deep, life-changing, turning inside out transformation. 1988 and 1991. I'll describe those, and I can differently, but not right now. I'm going through this work for the third time, 1994. And he asks me to take a look at this paragraph and to make it personal, not we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't try our human problems with the same readiness to change my point of view, but to make it personal and use the set-aside attitude and a set-aside prayer. That was the very first time that I used the set-aside attitude and the set-aside prayer. He said, are you willing to be taken to a place that you don't even know exists? Wow. Yes, I was actually. And I embraced the attitude and the prayer. And he said, make this personal. I have to ask myself why I shouldn't apply to my human problems this same readiness to change my point of view. I am having trouble with personal relationships, 10 years sober, 25 years married, wanting a divorce. Yeah, that was true. I can control my emotional nature. That wasn't as much true. I'd gotten a lot of balance from the steps and the spiritual awakening, and I had a lot of, I didn't know it at the time in terms of the words and the concepts, but I had a lot of emotional sobriety at the time. I was using meditation on a daily basis, and I was using the tool of the 10th step on a spot check inventory. I had some emotional sobriety. I didn't know all of the ingredients or the names of it even then, but I had the experience of it. The steps do for us what we can't do for ourselves, even without the knowledge of it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, some of these were a 8 and some of these were a 2. All relative, because I'd had some change already. I am a prey to misery and depression, not so much. I can't make a living that satisfies me. Well, that satisfies me is given to me in a meditation because I take each one of these into a meditation. I can't make a living. Well, wait a minute, I'm 10 years sober. I've got an incredibly good profession. I'm well recognized and well compensated, and I love it. Well, how does that work? I took it into meditation, and that tiny whispering sound, which is, by the way, the accurate translation of the phrase from the Aramaic. I don't read Aramaic, but I read people who do. It's not the tiny whispering voice, the wee small voice. That's not that. I mean, it's okay, but it's not the right translation. The right translation is the tiny whispering sound. It's quite different. And I listen to this sound in me in meditation. And I asked the question, how does this apply to me? I can't make a living. And the wee small voice said, you can't make a living that satisfies you because you're a black hole. And the voice continued and got a little louder because there's never enough power or prestige or adulation or pleasure, is there, Herb? Thank you very much for sharing. So I had an experience with it. At 10 years of sobriety, I could see that my recalcitrant narcissism was still very much alive and hadn't really been addressed. Fortunately, I was in therapy at this time. And the therapist was helping me to unpack the 9 ingredients of a narcissistic personality. At that point, he was able to assess me on a scale of 10, 7.5. And 20 years ago, when we were doing some work together, he reassessed me and said, oh, you're about 2.5 now. You never get over it. It's irremediable. It cannot be treated by therapy or medication, narcissism. It's a personality corruption. Genetic or culture, trained or not, it doesn't matter. It has permanent wrinkles in your soul. But fortunately, the spiritual work that you do through the 12 steps, 10, 11, and 12 especially, have ironed out some of those wrinkles. And you've become a decent human being that can monitor and manage this selfishness and self-centeredness that is the heart of the bedevilment's unmanageability, as well as the psychological description of narcissism. I have a feeling of uselessness, not so much. I am full of fear, a little bit, certainly a fear of public humiliation, a fear of really good-looking and articulate and aggressive women. Yeah, these were my fears. They were paralyzing things in 1994. Probably part of the reason that I drank prior to 1984. Oh, let me see here. I am unhappy. A little bit because of the marriage situation, but I was able to resolve that. The last line says, I can't seem to be a real help to other people. That's from the book. And then I took it into meditation. What do you mean? I studied to be a Catholic priest. I mean, I was 7 years a monk. That was all about becoming helpful to people. Then I studied psychology, did all the graduate work in the therapy to become a psychologist. I never did. Alcohol hijacked me a couple times. At least that was my explanation at that time. I took a couple left turns, which I thought were unfortunate decisions until I understood that those were the decisions that accumulated the knowledge and the experience for me to do what I do today. I can't seem to be of real help to other people. I'm sponsoring people. What do you mean? And I took it into meditation. And that last line, if you can't read it, says, I can't seem to be of real help to other people, nor do I really want to help other people. And the insight that the wee small voice, that tiny whispering sound gave me was, I don't really want to help other people. I want the reputation of helping people. Again, reinforcing that narcissism. The bedevilments. That's the word used in page 52. Look it up in the dictionary, to be controlled by devils. I don't mean to be religious at all. I'm using it as a metaphor, poetically, really, to give you a feel for the image that I have that's my favorite is that I was a puppet on strings. Circumstances and people had the strings, and as they pulled the strings, I reacted. Sophisticated people call it codependency, I'm sure. I was a victim. I had tied the strings to the people and the circumstances, but this process had begun now to cut those strings. That's really emotional sobriety. That's really the freedom that comes as a promise of doing this work. We looked at in my talk about the addiction, the body problem, craving, again, a very misunderstood word. It's very clear if you read the doctor's opinion carefully that the craving never happens until after you take the first drink. Hello, please hear this. It's not I crave a drink. Hello. Thinking that I crave a drink, feeling that I crave a drink. No. The craving in the doctor's opinion is totally unconscious. There's no thought, there's no feeling, there's no awareness. It's his term for the biochemical reaction after I take the drink. Once I take the drink, the chemical of the alcohol interacts with the chemistry of my body, and I've poured black ink into white water, and it's never white again. No choice. And it would be the same with gambling. I make a first bet, and then I'm off to the races, pun intended. It's the same with food. I make an exception. It's going to be different this time. I can have a scoop of ice cream. I finish that gallon and I go out to get another gallon. It's not my problem, but I've heard it excruciating circumstances from food addicts. Probably the worst addiction that there is, because we have to eat. And there's no black and white rules. There's no commonality of the stimulus for addiction. Sugar, of course, and flour, of course, the primary culprits. But then it's really about the individuality of body chemistry. But the problem here at the bottom of the screen, again, you can't see it as well, is the mind, and we need to awaken. I have a strange mental blank spot, kind of like color blindness. I can't distinguish between green and brown. You could show it to me, you can describe it, you can point it out, but I can't distinguish it because I have a retinal deficiency in my eye that will not allow me to process color. No, I cannot process color. It doesn't matter what I want, think, or am told or understand. I cannot process color. My mind cannot process reality, especially about alcohol. Other things too, but especially about alcohol. But the real problem is the problem of my will. This is unmanageability. Unmanageability is self-centered. Bill says it on page 60. So we had to take a look at some more material in the big book in chapter 5. Notice I just looked at the bedevilments in chapter 4. That paragraph describes the behavioral description of unmanageability. How do I behave? Take a look at that paragraph, convert it to present tense and personal pronoun, and read it out loud. No, I'm challenging you. Convert that paragraph to the personal pronoun, present tense, like I did on the screen with the PowerPoint, and read it out loud for yourself today with the consciousness, the development, the freedom from addiction that you have today. And it will be the litmus test of your spiritual condition, the litmus test of your spiritual condition, a screen through which you can filter. How are you doing? How are you doing in living life? Because addiction is a problem of a substance or a process, but unmanageability is a spiritual defect, is the human defect. Those are synonyms here. Only 1 out of 10 people are alcoholics, 5 out of 10 people are some other form of addiction, substance or process. The first half of the first step is relevant. The second half of the first step, every human being on the face of the earth, there's 7 billion of us, has this problem of unmanageability, not anything to do with addiction. Please hear it. Now, the addiction aggravates it. But without addiction, 100% of the human race is unmanageable. I mean, of course, the news will tell you that in spades. On page 60, at the end of the ABCs, he has this powerful line. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. The definition of unmanageability is self-will. Now, he goes to great lengths on page 60 to 62 to describe what that looks like. If you want another experience with unmanageability today, with the consciousness that you have, the freedom from addiction that you have today, read pages 60 to 62 in the same way I described to read the bedevilments on page 52. Read it in the personal pronoun present tense and read it out loud. You will be stunned and then you'll be embarrassed. It's my prediction because that was my experience and still is, by the way. On page 62, Bill gives us the exact nature of why the bedevilments is a behavioral description. Selfishness, dash, self-centeredness, exclamation point. I'm looking at the book. Selfishness, dash, self-centeredness, exclamation point. That's the first sentence of the first paragraph on that page. It doesn't even have a verb. It's the silver bullet. It's the definition of unmanageability. It's the heart of the matter. It's why Bill says in step 10, we're not cured. The best kept secret in the rooms. What does that mean? we're not cured. We are recovered. You don't have to look far to find that. Look at the second title page of the big book. The first title page has the title, Alcoholics Anonymous. The second title page, it has a lot more information. Don't overlook it. How thousands of men and women have recovered. Recovered. Past tense, recovered. What does that mean? Bill says in step 10, we enter the world of the spirit. We're finishing step 9. He says we commence this way of living. Commence meaning begin. We commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. Please hear that. I'm a big book literalist and fundamentalist. Pay attention to the words. We commenced, begin, this way of living, 10, 11, and 12, as we cleaned up the past. Oh, that means, Herb, that you give to your sponsees the instructions on step 10 when they are about to begin doing step 9, because they have done a complete inventory of their harms done and what they're going to do about it in step 8. And they have an instruction from your experience and direction on how to begin doing step 9, how to begin doing step 9. So you give them the step 10 instructions so that they can keep the channel clear. You give them the 11-step instructions so that they can fill the channel. And you give them the 12-step instructions so that they can really understand consciously living by principles in helping other people. Before they ever begin doing the 9th step, we commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We entered the world of the spirit. Where have we been? Where have we been? Oh, we've been in the world of self. Steps 1 through 9, navigating the world of self, the program of recovery from both addiction and our unmanageability. Excuse me. My Bluetooth is tied to my phone and I have my hearing aids on and they're ringing in my ear. There, it's gone now. Thank you. I couldn't turn it off. Very distracting. We enter the world of the spirit. What does it mean? This is the model of the human being that I use to explain step 1 and each of the steps and all of the steps, a story for a different day. I've indicated it in step 1 already. So we have recovered, meaning that we're no longer thinking about drinking, nor are we drinking. We're not, the inclination has been removed. Oh, here, please hear the big book, page 84. We have been placed in a position of neutrality. Oh, listen to that. We have been placed. That's the grace. We didn't do it. We're powerless. I heard a talk I was listening to Bill on a walk the other day from, the 50s, and he was saying after his mountaintop mystical experience, he was delivered. I had never heard the term before. What a great term. There's an open mic someplace. Please close it. What a great term. I was delivered. We enter the world of the spirit. We are recovered. We are placed in a position of neutrality, but we're not cured. We have a daily reprieve. We have physical sobriety. There's an open mic someplace. There we go. I'm going to close it myself. Thank you. We have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. You see, in step 1, we have no choice. We become brain dead to the word powerless. Because we hear it so often. What does it mean? Well, it literally means no power. But it has no power. That word has no power because we have said it so many times. Use the alternative, no choice. When I put it in me, I have no choice. When I don't put it in me, I don't have a choice. There will come a time and a place if I'm not spiritually prepared, meaning that I have a defense, I have a shield. I get that shield from the practice of 10, 11, and 12. I am self-centered. The turning that takes place is for me to be other-centered. Oh gosh, it's that simple. I am self-centered, pages 60 to 62, confirmed in that first paragraph on page 62. This is the exact nature of it. And then at the bottom of that second paragraph, Bill concludes his discussion of unmanageability, intentionally or unintentionally. He concludes his discussion of unmanageability in the same way he concluded his discussion about addiction on page 43. Look at on page 62. He's incredible in terms of the organic integrity of this big book. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. I cannot work the steps and assume that I have power by working the steps. I hope that that will be the outcome. But in all humility, I have to accept that I am totally powerless, that I do not have a choice, that my free will on its own power will always choose me. And the only salvation for me, the only solution for me is to be connected to a power other than myself. And I can't do that. That's a total gift. I can't explain willingness. I can't explain grace. But I can observe the connection. I can't explain it. Why was I willed? Why did I receive the grace? I can't go there. I have to completely collapse, implode. Bill says on page 30, a much better definition of or description of powerlessness and step one than the step one on page 59, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we are alcoholics, that we are addicts. This is the first step in recovery. This is the first step, fully concede to our innermost self. The delusion that we are like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. Wow. The delusion that we are like other people or ever will be. Once a pickle, always a pickle. We commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. Let me see. See, to be in alignment with reality. This is emotional sobriety. To clean the channel, a spot check inventory, step 10. To fill the channel with the consciousness that comes from the practice of meditation. To empty the channel, to allow it to be distributed. I'm a lantern, I'm not the light. But I stand by the path to shine the light on the path so others can walk the path and find the light. This is our way of life, Bill says, keeping our head in the clouds and our feet on the ground. Unmanageability, we're powerless. I'm awestruck right now, sitting here talking about it. Again, I'm having an experience of awe, of the humility that I cannot do this today and that I'm totally dependent on a power other than myself. And that's a grace and it's a gift. I've heard it said that the steps are the preconditions to the receiving of the gift. Bill says it's a guarantee, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Fortunately, it's my experience, and there's been gifts before the work, and there's been work before the gifts. I can't explain willingness or grace, but I can observe it. Thanks, enough out of me. Thanks.